This is the Lamzu Thorn. It's a lightweight, medium-sized ergo mouse that has optical switches and is 4 kHz polling rate compatible. This kind of mouse seems to be pretty standard these days, but it was actually my favorite mouse of 2023 and still continues to be my favorite ergo mouse. I know I'm late to this video, but honestly, it seems like this mouse is still a bit of a sleeper on the market. You only have like 100 reviews on Amazon, and there's only like 6 well put together reviews from mouse reviewers. And I'll be honest, this mouse is ultimately a bit boring to me. It's just good at most things. The clicks are good, no problems there, but they aren't fantastic. The side buttons are the same story. The weight is nice, but these days, 52 grams is kinda average. The internals are super high quality. It uses a 3395 sensor and a Nordics MCU, so you're going to get top tier performance out of the mouse, but again, that's not really uncommon these days. I can't find specific figures on what the battery life is. I can say in my personal experience though, I've gone about 2 weeks without needing to recharge, so it's more than decent. So what sets this apart from something else that has come out this year? Well, let me tell you, it's 3 things. Number 1 is going to be the shape feels like nothing I've ever used before. I don't really like ergo mice. I've tried a decent number of them. I've tried the Ponage Ultra Custom, the EC1 and the EC2, the DeathAdder V3, and I had an OG DeathAdder Chroma as well as the DeathAdder V2 Mini and the Model D, and I didn't exactly enjoy any of those mice. However, out of all of them, this is easily the best, and it's not even really close. Firstly, this shape is not an EC clone. One of my biggest complaints is that ergo mice often clone a shape that I don't necessarily enjoy. However, this is not the case here. This is a Lamzu's own shape, but it is heavily inspired by the EC3. The shape has an aggressive curve on both the top curve and both side curves. It also is 42 millimeters tall, which is actually quite tall for how short the mouse is. So again, this is going to be most similar to a Zowie EC3, but it's not as wide and it is a millimeter taller, so slight difference. This doesn't sound like too much of a change, but honestly, it's a whole entire world of difference. Having the proportions of the mouse be smaller, especially in the grip, makes this mouse feel super nimble and really light, which is something that I've never felt with an ergo mouse. Typically with ergo mice, they're heavy, they prioritize a comfortable shape over a shape that will be fast enough to keep up, and up to this point, nothing has been able to feel as fast as a symmetrical mouse for me. And I think that's just neat that it can compete with something that I would consider top tier performance and top tier ability for an esports competitive gaming mouse. Now, this mouse still does fill a lot more of your hand than a symmetrical mouse, but it's worth mentioning that this is one of the only ergo shapes that I've ever used that doesn't compromise on either comfort or speed. And it's worth mentioning that it does all this at 24 grams lighter than the closest competition, the EC3. So the shape and the weight is easily the best and most unique part of this mouse. The coating is easily the best I've ever tried for humid climates. This one just feels super smooth and dry, and this is the first mouse that I can confidently say absolutely nobody in their right mind would ever think about using grip tape, but unfortunately it is a little bit of a fingerprint magnet. Lastly, these are some of the best stock glides I've ever used. They're insanely consistent. Going from a cloth pad to a hard pad, typically on worse stock glides, you'll feel a little bit of a surface change. What I mean by that is sometimes they can be more scratchy when using hard pads compared to cloth pads, and sometimes vice versa if you get uber shit mouse glides. However, these feel pretty much exactly the same on a hard pad as it does a cloth pad, which is entirely unheard of, at least in my opinion, for stock glides. Something like core pads, they do have this feeling, but they're aftermarket. You have to pay, I think it was like $15 for my set of core pads on my Superlight. However, it's worth mentioning that some reviewers have mentioned that this consistency comes at the cost of speed. They're saying that some stock glides that have relatively decent consistency are actually faster on hard surfaces compared to this mouse, and I personally don't experience that. If anything, it's a hair faster on cloth than it is on hard pads, but compared to a compared to a mouse that has a comparable weight, it is actually just as fast. I haven't noticed any speed changes or anything like that, so not on my copy, that's not the case. However, I guess if anything, be aware that this might be a point of contention with Lamzu's QA. Regardless, I still think this is easily, I'm going to say, top 3 stock glides I've ever tried. Number 1 being ULX stock glides, so if that says anything, then there you go. Just a treat for all you ASMR people out there. I'm going to do a sound test of all the clicks and build quality features of the mouse just so you can get an idea of how it feels. So it sounds super tight, everything feels well put together, and it passes the pinch test. However, I do have one concern with the build quality, and it may be the only negative I have of the mouse, but that would be the scroll wheel. It looks awfully similar to the way the Air 58 scroll wheel was constructed, which is an infamously poor scroll wheel that did not hold up over time. However, I am well aware that this is a extremely deep nitpick, and I never personally used the scroll wheel on the Air 58, but as of right now, the one on the Lamzu feels pretty sturdy. Maybe a tad bit squishy, which is where my concern comes from, but only time will tell. With all that being said, this mouse comes in at a staggeringly cheap $100 with the 4K dongle included, only $90 if you don't want the 4K dongle. Super cool that they actually give you the option to not get the 4K dongle if you don't want it, but with that being said, you can also buy the 4K dongle after the fact and it will still work in 4 kHz polling rate. So yeah, absolutely killer deal from Lamzu here. I'll just say this, there are better mice out there. There are going to be better suited mice to some people. This isn't the end-all be-all best mouse ever. This is just one of the best value mice. For $90 or $100, you get 4K hertz, you get tons of really good features, and one of the most unique shapes I've ever felt. But I'm not going to be switching from my symmetrical mice to the Lamzu Thorn full time. I still really like it, and I'll just end it at this. If you're somebody who loves claw grip, if you're somebody who has medium-sized hands and does palm grip, or if you just really love unique mouse shapes, this is undoubtedly, even in 2024, the best option.